second scripture reading follows right after the last one. It's Matthew 2:13 to 23 on page 1498. Now after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they were no more. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Israel and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. For he will be called a Nazarene. This is the word of the Lord.
We don't stay long at the nativity scene as we typically know it. And what I need to talk about today in terms of this text is may just kind of ruin our Christmas reverie, trying to hold on a little longer to Christmas. And that is that the reality is that Jesus was a refugee. He was a refugee. We've made Jesus in a manger kind of sweet and nostalgic, even though if you really put him in those circumstances, it's hardly sweet and nostalgic. But that's what we've done. But Jesus as a refugee, seeking asylum in a foreign country, and how does that make you feel? Does it upset you? Maybe it actually could bring some comfort to you. Are we ashamed by it? Are we ashamed to think of Jesus, the Son of God, in a situation not unlike a Mexican child brought illegally to the United States by her parents, or not unlike a Syrian family huddled in a refugee camp with an uncertain future because other nations are closing their borders to them? Jesus as a refugee? It may sound disturbing, frightful, or it could somehow be hopeful or encouraging depending on your circumstances. So Matthew 2 begins with that beautiful scene of 3 distinguished magi, or wise men, paying homage to the Christ child, offering expensive gifts to this newborn king. With the arrival of the wise men, the nativity is complete now. So Merry Christmas. It's now the end of the tranquil or busy Christmas week. Happy New Year, the beginning of a fresh new calendar. We've paused for a brief respite from the real world to revel in the Christmas fantasy, and then suddenly reality hits. We come back to reality, if we ever could really leave it. Because we can only pretend getting along with family for so long, right? And we can't avoid the violence in the world, even if for one day, because it's everywhere in the news. And as much as we like to think that everyone gets home for Christmas, it's not true. Men and women still sit in wheelchairs cluttered in nursing homes. Folks are still in the hospital and may not get home for Christmas. The patients at Trenton site probably stay right where they are. And there are the runaway children, and there are the faraway friends, and then, yes, there are the refugees who don't have a home to go to for Christmas, or whatever their holiday might be. According to the United Nations, there are over 65 million forcibly displaced people in the world, 21.3 million refugees. 21.3 million refugees, half of whom are under the age of 18 years old. Some people that I hadn't actually thought of until I looked up those statistics are the stateless people. 10 million stateless people who have been denied a nationality and access to basic rights such as education, health care, employment, and freedom of movement. Lamenting this, the largest refugee crisis of our time, Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, described it not just as a crisis of numbers, but a crisis of solidarity. A crisis of solidarity. Does it give us a different perspective on the refugee crisis to remember that Jesus began his childhood as a refugee? Perhaps if we think of that word solidarity. So I like the description of Thomas Troger enough to use his words here instead of mine. He describes the scene. The infant Jesus has just received extravagant gifts from exotic visitors. The meaning of his birth, the promise of his life seemed in that bright and shining moment so momentous, so filled with hope. And now another dream, a nightmare, Herod out to kill the newborn child. Joseph moves from promise to terror, stuffing together whatever they have, walking down the street and out the gate onto the main road to get to Egypt as fast as possible. The child crying, the mother exhausted, Joseph's heart clutching in his throat every time he sees a soldier. See, they're refugees. They're refugees. Time in Egypt. Then that time passes, and Herod dies. Now the couple and the child can go home. After dealing with a strange language, food, and customs, after living as displaced persons, maybe as illegal immigrants, they can now go home to their own land and their own people. But then upon returning home, they learn that the new ruler, the son of Herod, is more cruel than his father, and Joseph again fears for his safety and his family. Another dream, and they realize there's no homecoming now. And so they go north to Galilee, to an obscure place called Nazareth. Obscure, out of the way, hopefully a safe place. But it wasn't exactly home for a good while. So Jesus began his life as a refugee, fleeing from Judea to Egypt, from Egypt to Judea, from Judea to Galilee. As Jesus himself would one day say, the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. So knowing this about Jesus might be helpful to us for ourselves. Being able to face being away from family or dealing with broken homes. I mean, isn't it true that in tough times we appreciate knowing that someone has endured the very same thing that we have? Before my prostate surgery a year ago, it helped me to talk with some men who had had the procedure. A parent who has lost a child benefits greatly in meeting other parents who have lost a child. Because, why? Because they get it. They understand, they grasp the depth of grief they're going through. And so, to know that the Son of God understood being far from home and cut off from family, well, that can be comforting. To think that God gets it and understands what we're going through. It may also change our own attitudes and actions toward refugees. I wonder if we don't tend to distance ourselves from the refugee crisis. Or if we join in those complaining about illegal immigrants taking American jobs, or blocking Syrian refugees from coming to the U.S. and say, no, 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 don't let them come here. Jesus, the Son of God, identified with the displaced. He was one of them. Does that change anything in our perspectives? USA Today reported on the pastor of Redemption Church in Tempe, Arizona. The pastor recalled a photo of the tiny body of 3-year-old Alan Kurdi washed up on the shore of the Mediterranean Sea after he and his mother and brother drowned trying to escape from Syria. The pastor realized Jesus was close to that same age during his experience as a refugee. And he explained to the reporter, Jesus entered in the same small shoes that you see in that picture as part of his incarnation. It gave the pastor and his church a new perspective. And it led that Redemption Church to connect to the refugee crisis a few years ago when it gathered its members as a human shield around a nearby mosque that serves a large refugee population. The church members circled the mosque as a sign of solidarity, as a sign of protection. The church started a, quote, good works team to help refugees find meaningful employment in the Tempe area. The article talked about another church, one in Illinois, had a similar revelation. The reality of Jesus' experience as a refugee has caused us to think more carefully about and sympathize more readily with the plight of refugees in general, their pastor explained to the reporter. So that congregation embarked on a fundraising campaign to raise $250,000 for 3 organizations working with refugees. It also plans to help a relief organization by volunteering as airport pickup assistants and friendship partners for resettlement. And some of the women of the church have started partnering with the women of a refugee artisans group. I don't know, how do you feel about the baby Jesus as a refugee? And some of what I'm thinking are some implications, and others have too. It should not surprise us that Jesus, because as an adult, Jesus ministered to refugees, right? Those who were outcasts, those who were dispossessed, those who were suffering. That's where Jesus focused his ministry. And then he told his followers one time this story about, helping visit prisoners and feed the hungry and so on. And he said, whenever you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, whenever you served them, helped them, you did it for me. Whenever you did it for one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did it for me. I think Jesus could just as well have said, whatever you do for one of these refugees, you do it for me. Because I was one of them. I was one of them. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.